The morning of the tournament arrived with the sound of alien music echoing through the ship. Hyunwoo had been in his cell for 7 days now, and he knew every guard rotation, every shift change, and every weak point in the prison security. The blue-scaled female named Kira had told him more about the arena fights and what to expect, but nothing could prepare him for the size of the crowd that had gathered. Alien crime bosses from across the galaxy had come to watch the games. Their ships filled the hangar bays while they brought bodyguards and weapons and enough money to buy entire planets. The arena itself was in the center of the warship, a massive circular pit, surrounded by thousands of seats that rose up like a metal mountain. Lights blazed down from above, making the sandy floor look like gold. Hyunwoo was taken from his cell, along with 20 other prisoners. They were given basic armor that barely fit and weapons that were old and damaged. The guards laughed as they watched the prisoners struggle with equipment that might break in the first fight. The armor was too big for Hyunwoo's human frame, but he made it work by tightening straps and padding gaps with torn cloth in the waiting area under the arena. He met the other fighters. Some were professional gladiators who had won their freedom years ago but chose to keep fighting for money. Others were prisoners like him, hoping to survive long enough to escape. Most looked terrified, but a few had the hard eyes of killers who had nothing left to lose. A tall insectoid creature with 4 arms and poison dripping from its claws was stretching in the corner. It had won 15 fights in a row, and the aliens called it Deathbringer. Hyunwoo watched how it moved and noticed that its left rear leg favored one side like it had an old injury. The creature was dangerous, but not invincible. The first fights began with roars from the crowd. Aliens bet enormous amounts of money on each battle, while slaves served them food and drinks. Hyunwoo watched through a small window as prisoners fought giant beasts and each other. The sand quickly turned red with blood, and the crowd cheered every time someone died horribly. When they called his name, the guards pushed him toward the arena entrance. The tunnel was dark and smelled like death, but Hyunwoo walked calmly toward the light. His opponent was already waiting in the center of the pit. It was a creature like a giant spider, with metal claws and acid that dripped from its mouth. The crowd was already laughing and making jokes about how quickly the small human would die. Warlord Vex Thorak sat in a luxury box high above the arena, surrounded by the most powerful crime bosses in the galaxy. He raised one clawed hand and the crowd fell silent. "This is a special treat," he announced in his booming voice. "A human from the legendary Earth. Many of you have heard stories about these creatures, but today you will see how weak they really are." The betting started immediately, and Hyunwoo could see the odds displayed on screens around the arena. 1,000 to 1 against him surviving the first minute, 5,000 to 1 against him winning the fight. The aliens had so little respect for humans that they were treating this like a comedy show instead of a real battle. The spider creature moved toward him with its acid dripping onto the sand where it hissed and bubbled. Hyunwoo held his damaged sword and waited. The crowd was cheering for the monster to finish him quickly, but he ignored them completely. His SEAL training had taught him to focus on the enemy and nothing else. The spider lunged at him with incredible speed, but Hyunwoo was already moving. He rolled to the side and came up near the creature's back legs where it could not easily reach him. The crowd gasped in surprise when his first strike cut deep into the monster joint. He had found the weak spot immediately. For the next few minutes, Hyunwoo played a deadly game of cat and mouse with the creature. He stayed away from its claws and acid while making small cuts that weakened it. The spider grew more frustrated and started making mistakes. Hyunwoo had fought many dangerous enemies in his military career, and this was just another mission. The crowd had stopped laughing now. They watched in silence as the small human systematically destroyed their champion. The spider tried to spray acid at him, but he used its own legs as shields. The monster tried to crush him, but he was too fast. The creature tried to corner him, but he knew how to use the arena walls to his advantage. When the spider finally collapsed from blood loss, the arena was completely quiet. Hyunwoo stood over the dead creature, breathing hard but showing no emotion. The sword in his hand was covered in green blood and his armor was torn, but he was alive. The odd screens around the arena flickered and went blank because nobody had bet on this outcome. Warlord Thorak leaned forward, in his box, suddenly very interested in the human who had just done the impossible. He gestured to his guards. and they brought him information about the prisoner. The records showed Park Hyun-woo was just a simple scout pilot, but the way he fought suggested military training of the highest level. Over the next 3 days, Hyun-woo fought 5 more battles. Each opponent was bigger and more dangerous than the last, but he defeated them all using speed and tactics instead of brute force. He fought a creature made of living crystal by finding the frequency that shattered its body. He defeated a fire-breathing beast by using the arena sand to clog its throat. He killed a pack of wolf-like aliens by turning them against each other with each victory. The crowd reaction changed from laughter to surprise to fear. The betting odds shifted until aliens were actually putting money on the human to win. Nobody had ever seen a prisoner dominate the arena like this, especially not one from a species they considered extinct. The other prisoners in the holding area started looking at him with something like hope. But Hyun-woo was not just fighting to survive. He was learning everything he could about the ship and its crew. Every time they moved him through the corridors, he memorized new routes. Every guard he saw was cataloged with their weapons and weaknesses. Every conversation he overheard added to his growing understanding of how the Crimson Fang operated. The alien crime bosses were starting to ask questions about where this human had come from and whether there were others like him. Some wanted to buy him as a personal bodyguard. Others suggested capturing more humans to see if they all fought this way. A few of the smarter ones were beginning to worry about what this meant for their operations. Kira, the blue-scaled female, had been moved to a cell closer to his so they could talk more easily. She told him that the guards were nervous and the crew was arguing about the human fighter. Some wanted to kill him immediately before he caused more problems. Others thought he was too valuable to waste. The ship was starting to divide into factions. Hyun-woo used this information to plan his next moves. He knew that winning fights would only keep him alive for a short time. Eventually, they would either kill him or sell him to someone worse. But if he could create enough chaos and confusion, he might be able to turn the prisoners into an army. The arena had given him a reputation, but now he needed to use that reputation as a weapon. On the 7th night after his first victory, Hyun-woo was lying in his cell when Kira whispered that she had news. The guards were planning something special for tomorrow, a battle royal with all the surviving prisoners fighting each other until only one remained. It was supposed to be the grand finale of the tournament, but Hyun-woo knew it was really an execution disguised as entertainment. He also knew it would be the perfect opportunity to start the real fight, the one that would decide whether he died as a prisoner or lived as a free man. The arena had taught the aliens to fear him, but tomorrow they would learn what it really meant to capture a Navy SEAL. The games were about to end and the war was about to begin. The news of the battle royal spread through the prison like wildfire. 20 prisoners would enter the arena, and only one would leave alive. The aliens wanted a show that would end their tournament with maximum violence and profit. But Hyun-woo saw something different in this announcement. He saw the perfect opportunity to turn scared prisoners into a coordinated fighting force. During the exercise period that day, he moved carefully among the other prisoners. He had earned their respect with his arena victories, but respect was not enough for what he planned. He needed absolute trust from beings who barely knew him. Kira introduced him to the key leaders among the different species groups. Each had their own reasons for hating their captors. There was Zek, a young reptilian engineer who had been captured when pirates destroyed his research station. He was smart and angry and knew how the ship systems worked. Master Quinn was an elderly bird-like philosopher from the Aryan species, who had been teaching the other prisoners to read alien writing. He understood the crew schedules and supply routes better than anyone. The most important contact was Jin So-min, a human engineer who had been captured 8 months earlier when raiders attacked her civilian transport. She had been forced to maintain the warship weapon systems and knew exactly where every critical component was located. When she saw another human had survived the arena, her eyes filled with tears. Jin So-min had given up hope of ever seeing Earth again. The aliens had convinced her that humanity was extinct, except for a few scattered survivors like herself. But when she learned that Hyun-woo was a Navy SEAL from an active Earth military, she realized everything had changed. Her knowledge combined with his training could give them a real chance at freedom. Over the next 2 days, Hyunwoo held secret meetings in the exercise yard, and during mealtimes, he taught basic military tactics to aliens who had never fought as a group before. Most had been merchants or civilians when captured. But desperation and anger could turn anyone into a fighter if they had proper leadership. The plan he developed was complex but achievable. The battle royal would happen during the biggest party of the tournament, when half the crew would be drunk and distracted. All security attention would be focused on the arena, while the real action happened in other parts of the ship. Prisoners working as slaves throughout the vessel would strike simultaneously. Zek would use his engineering knowledge to disable artificial gravity in the crew quarters. Jin So-min would overload the weapon charging systems to create explosions that looked accidental. Master Quinn would lead a group to capture the communication center and prevent distress calls. Other prisoners would take control of key ship sections using routes and timing that Hyunwoo had memorized. The most dangerous part was that Hyunwoo would have to be in the arena when it started. He could not be seen organizing the rebellion, or the aliens would kill all the conspirators immediately. Instead, he would have to trust his new allies to begin the uprising, while he fought for his life in front of thousands of enemy spectators. Jin So-min provided detailed maps of the ship that she had drawn from memory over months of forced labor. She showed him where the main power cores were located, and how to disable the engines without destroying the entire vessel. She also revealed that the ship carried several smaller craft that could be used to escape if everything went wrong. The hardest part was convincing aliens from different species to work together. Many had ancient prejudices against each other, and some had been enemies before being captured. But Hyunwoo used his arena reputation to unite them under a common cause. Freedom was worth more than old hatreds, and revenge against their captors mattered more than species differences during weapons training for the battle royal. Hyunwoo secretly showed other prisoners how to kill guards quickly and quietly. He demonstrated pressure points that worked on different alien anatomies, and taught them to use improvised weapons from common objects. A food tray could break bones if used correctly. A maintenance tool could cut through armor if applied to the right spot. The alien guards noticed that the prisoners seemed more confident lately, but they assumed it was because of the human fighter success in the arena. They thought the other prisoners were inspired by seeing one of their own win battles. Nobody suspected that inspiration was being turned into military organization under their noses. 2 days before the battle royal, Warlord Thorak made a decision that almost ruined everything. He announced that the human fighter was too valuable to risk in a group battle, and would face a single champion instead. The crowd wanted to see if Park Hyunwoo could defeat their greatest warrior in individual combat. But this meant he would not be able to coordinate the timing of the rebellion. Hyunwoo had to quickly adapt his plans. He gave final instructions to Jin So-min and the other leaders, then trusted them to act without his direct command. The rebellion would begin when the arena lights dimmed for the champion entrance ceremony. That would be the signal for simultaneous strikes throughout the ship. The champion turned out to be a massive alien called Bone Crusher, who had never lost a fight in 50 battles. He stood 3 meters tall with natural armor plating and arms like tree trunks. The crowd roared approval when he entered the arena, carrying weapons that looked like they could cut through steel. The betting heavily favored the champion. But some aliens had learned to respect the human fighter. As Hyunwoo walked toward the arena for what might be his final battle, he thought about all the people depending on him. Hundreds of prisoners throughout the ship were ready to risk their lives based on plans made by a human they barely knew. If he died in the next few minutes, they would probably die too. But if he could survive long enough, the entire balance of power would shift. The arena lights began to dim, and somewhere in the darkness of the ship, Jin So-min was placing her hands on weapon system controls that she had been forced to maintain for months. Zek was moving toward gravity control panels that he had memorized during his repair. Workmaster Quinn was gathering his followers near the communication center. Others were creeping through service tunnels toward their assigned targets. The rebellion was beginning, and there was no turning back. The aliens had made their biggest mistake by giving human prisoners time to organize and plan. Now they were about to discover that capturing Navy SEAL was not just dangerous, it was the beginning of the end for their reign of terror. The arena would become a symbol, but the real battle would be fought in the corridors and control rooms, where freedom would be won or lost forever. Hyunwoo raised his sword toward Bone Crusher and smiled. The alien champion saw that smile, and for the first time in his career felt something he had never experienced before: fear of a human opponent. The games were over and the war was beginning. The prisoners were about to become an army, and the Crimson Fang was about to learn what happened when you captured the wrong human. The arena lights dimmed to darkness, and Bone Crusher raised his massive weapons toward the ceiling in a traditional victory salute. But the victory celebration he expected would never come. In that moment of darkness throughout the Crimson Fang, hundreds of prisoners began the most coordinated rebellion in galactic history. Jin So-min placed her hands on the weapon control panels she knew better than anyone, and began the systematic destruction of the ship from within. The first explosion came from the main battery charging stations where Jin So-min had overloaded the power cores. The blast shook the entire ship and sent alarms screaming through every corridor. Emergency lights bathed everything in red, while confused crew members ran toward what they thought was an accident. But it was just the beginning of their nightmare. In the crew quarters, Zek activated his engineering knowledge to disable the artificial gravity systems. 300 alien pirates suddenly found themselves floating helplessly in zero gravity, while human-trained prisoners moved through the corridors like deadly fish in water. Hyunwoo had taught them basic zero-gravity combat during their secret training sessions. And now, those lessons became weapons. War Master Quinn led his group of older prisoners toward the communication center using maintenance shafts that he had mapped during months of observation. The guards never suspected that the quiet philosopher had been studying their routines and weaknesses. They died quickly and silently, as the elderly Aryan used techniques taught by a Navy SEAL to eliminate sentries. The arena crowd was still trying to understand why the lights had gone out when the artificial gravity failed. Thousands of alien crime bosses and their bodyguards were suddenly floating in chaos, while the arena floor tilted and spun. Bone Crusher, who had expected an easy victory against the human, found himself fighting for balance instead of fighting an opponent. Hyunwoo used the confusion to his advantage. His zero-gravity training from Earth military service made him far more capable than any alien in the arena. He pushed off walls and ceiling to build momentum, then struck at Bone Crusher with surgical precision. The massive champion armor meant nothing when he could not control his position in space. Throughout the ship, prisoners were discovering that months of secret military training had turned them into an effective fighting force. They used improvised weapons and coordinated tactics to overwhelm guards who had never faced organized resistance. The alien crew had grown soft and lazy from years of easy victories, and they were not prepared for enemies who fought like soldiers. Jin So-min moved through the weapon control areas like she owned them, which in a way she did. The aliens had forced her to maintain every system, and now she used that knowledge to turn their own weapons against them. She disabled the main guns that could destroy escape. Ships then activated internal security turrets to fire on crew members instead of prisoners. The explosions continued throughout the ship as she overloaded system after system. Each blast was carefully calculated to disable the vessel without destroying it completely. They needed the ship functional enough to get home, but crippled enough that no alien crew member could stop them. The fine line between sabotage and destruction required engineering precision that only she possessed. In the arena, Hyunwoo finished his battle with Bone Crusher by using the champion's own weight against him in zero gravity. A move that would have been impossible under normal conditions became deadly when physics worked differently. The crowd of floating aliens watched in horror as their greatest warrior was defeated by a human, using fighting techniques they had never seen before. But Hyunwoo did not have time to celebrate his victory. The rebellion was succeeding beyond his wildest hopes, but they still needed to secure the ship before alien reinforcements could arrive. He pushed off the arena wall and floated toward the luxury boxes where Warlord Thorak and the other crime bosses were struggling helplessly in zero gravity. The warlord saw him coming and tried to reach for his weapons, but floating in space with no gravity made simple movements almost impossible. Hyunwoo moved through the zero-gravity environment like he had been born in space while the aliens flailed helplessly around him. His military training had included extensive zero-gravity combat because Earth had been preparing for space warfare for decades. One by one, Hyunwoo eliminated the crime bosses who had come to watch prisoners die for entertainment. Their bodyguards were dangerous fighters under normal conditions, but they became helpless children when gravity disappeared. The human warrior moved among them like death itself, systematic and unstoppable and absolutely silent. Meanwhile, the prisoner revolt had spread to every section of the ship. Aliens who had seemed invincible when they had weapons and numbers found themselves outmatched by organized enemies who fought with discipline and coordination. The crew tried to regroup in the main hangar bay, but Zek had already disabled the blast doors, trapping them in sections where they could be defeated in Detail Master. Quinn secured the communication center and began broadcasting surrender demands to the scattered crew members. His cultured voice, speaking perfect alien languages, offered them a choice: submit immediately and live as prisoners, or continue fighting and die like their officers. The psychological effect was devastating, as aliens who had never been defeated began to surrender. Engineering sections fell next as Jin So-min led teams of prisoners who had been forced to work as maintenance slaves. They knew every pipe and wire and power conduit in the ship, and they used that knowledge to hunt down crew members who tried to hide. The aliens discovered too late that making prisoners maintain their ship had given those prisoners complete tactical knowledge of every system. By the time artificial gravity was restored 6 hours later, the rebellion was essentially over. Scattered groups of alien crew members still held a few sections, but they were surrounded and cut off from supplies or communications. The prisoners had not just escaped, they had captured one of the most feared warships in the galaxy and eliminated its entire command structure. Hyun-woo found Jin So-min in the main control center where she was working to fully understand the ship navigation systems. She had tears in her eyes as she told him what the long-range sensors were detecting. Other human ships were out there moving through space in organized fleets. Earth was not just alive, it was expanding across the galaxy and had been doing so quietly for decades. The aliens had been right to fear humans, but for completely wrong reasons. It was not because humans were particularly violent or cruel. It was because when humans decided to fight, they did so with a level of organization, tactical intelligence, and technological sophistication that the galaxy had not seen in centuries. The isolation had been intentional, a strategic deception to let other species underestimate human capabilities. Warlord Thorak was found floating in his luxury quarters, barely alive from injuries sustained during the zero-gravity battle. Hyun-woo stood over him and asked a simple question: how many human prisoners are held by your allies across the galaxy? The alien warlord, who had seemed so powerful and terrifying, was now just another source of intelligence about enemy operations. The answer was worse than Hyun-woo had expected. Thousands of humans were being held as slaves throughout criminal organizations across dozens of star systems. The aliens had been capturing human ships and colonies for years, believing they were harvesting the last remnants of an extinct species. Instead, they had been accumulating prisoners who could be turned into the most dangerous fighting force the galaxy had ever seen. As Jin So-min worked to decode the ship computer files, Hyun-woo realized that their escape was just the beginning. They had not just freed themselves, they had captured detailed information about every criminal operation that held human prisoners. The Crimson Fang database contained locations, ship movements, financial records, and communication codes for hundreds of illegal organizations. The former prisoners gathered in the main hangar bay where Hyun-woo addressed them as their new commander. They could return to their homeworlds and try to forget what had happened to them, or they could join him in a campaign to eliminate every criminal organization that dealt in slavery. The choice was theirs, but he was going hunting. Regardless, every prisoner chose to stay. They had seen what human military training could accomplish, and they wanted to be part of something larger than individual revenge. They wanted to be part of the force that would make the galaxy safe for all free beings. The Navy SEAL had taught them to fight, but more importantly, he had taught them to believe they could win. The message they sent to every criminal organization in the sector was simple and direct. The humans are back, and we are coming for you. The captured bridge of the Crimson Fang had become a war room where former prisoners worked alongside Jin So-min to understand the full scope of criminal operations throughout the galaxy. The ship computer files revealed a network of slavery and piracy that stretched across hundreds of star systems, with human prisoners scattered like lost treasures throughout the darkness. Hyunwoo stood before the main communication array preparing to send a message that would change everything. He had spent 3 days studying the intelligence gathered from the ship database. The information was both better and worse than he had hoped. Better, because Earth had indeed survived and spread across the galaxy in secret colonies that the aliens knew. Nothing about worse, because thousands of humans were being held by criminal organizations who treated them as exotic animals or disposable workers. Jin So-min had managed to establish contact with several human colonies that were hidden in the Outer Rim territories. The conversations confirmed what Hyunwoo had suspected. Earth had been deliberately maintaining a low profile to avoid attracting attention from hostile alien powers. The strategy had worked too well, because even friendly species had forgotten humans existed. But now the time for hiding was over. The criminal organizations had made the mistake of capturing and enslaving humans in large numbers. Their own greed had created the conditions for their destruction. Hyunwoo activated the communication system that could reach every corner of criminal space, and began to speak in a calm, clear voice that carried the authority of 20 years military service. This is Lieutenant Commander Park Hyunwoo of the Earth Defense Force speaking from the bridge of what used to be the Crimson Fang. Your warlord Thorak made the mistake of capturing humans. He is dead. His crew is dead. His ship is now under human control, and we have access to all his files, including detailed information about your operations. The response was immediate as communication channels throughout criminal space exploded with chatter. Some organizations tried to trace the signal, others demanded proof that the message was real. A few of the smarter crime bosses immediately began checking their own prisoner records to see if they were holding any humans. The paranoia spread faster than the actual message. Behind Hyunwoo, the freed prisoners worked with military efficiency to upload tactical data that showed exactly how a small group of humans had defeated a crew of 300 alien warriors. The files included detailed breakdowns of human fighting techniques, zero-gravity combat methods, and organizational systems that had turned desperate prisoners into an effective army. Master Quinn had been monitoring alien news networks and reported that the message was causing panic in criminal organizations throughout the galaxy. Stock prices for slavery operations were crashing as investors realized they might have accidentally captured members of a species that could fight back. The psychological impact was exactly what Hyunwoo had hoped for. The second part of the message was directed specifically at any humans who might be listening. We know you are out there and we are coming to find you. Earth has not forgotten you, and neither has the Defense Force. Every human prisoner will be freed. Every human colony will be protected, and every organization that has harmed our people will answer for their crimes. Jin So-min had been working to decode the ship computer files, and her discoveries were both encouraging and terrifying. The criminal organizations had been systematically attacking human settlements for decades, believing they were mopping up the remnants of an extinct civilization. Instead, they had been provoking a sleeping giant that was about to wake up very angry. The most important discovery was that Earth had not been passive during the years of isolation. The planet had been building a fleet and training soldiers and developing weapons that were generations ahead of anything the criminal organizations possessed. The Outer Rim colonies were not refugees. They were advanced bases for a military expansion that had been planned for centuries. Warlord Thorak had regained consciousness in the medical bay where he was being treated under guard. His interrogation revealed the locations of 17 major slave markets and the identities of crime bosses who specialized in human trafficking. The information was immediately uploaded to Earth Defense Force databases that Jin So-min had managed to contact. But Hyunwoo was not content to simply send information back to Earth and wait for official response. The humans held by criminal organizations needed immediate help, and he had captured the perfect tool for providing it. The Crimson Fang was one of the most feared warships in criminal space, and now it belonged to the good guys. The third part of his message was directed at the criminal organizations themselves. You have exactly 72 hours to release all human prisoners and surrender yourselves to the nearest legitimate government authority. After that time, we will begin hunting you down using your own ship and your own intelligence files. We know where you are, we know how you operate, and we know how to defeat you. The reaction to this ultimatum was predictable. Some crime bosses tried to rally their fleets for a coordinated response. Others began negotiating with human colonies to arrange prisoner releases. A few of the smartest criminals simply disappeared, hoping to avoid the coming storm. But most made the mistake of thinking they could intimidate humans into backing. Down Hyun-woo had expected this response, and he was ready for it. The Crimson Fang was more than just a captured ship. It was a symbol of what humans could accomplish when they were properly motivated. The former prisoners had become a crew that combined alien knowledge with human military discipline. They were eager to prove that their victory had not been a fluke. Over the next 3 days, reports came in from across the galaxy. Some criminal organizations had indeed released their human prisoners, but many others had decided to fight. The response confirmed what Hyun-woo had suspected. The criminal underworld had grown so arrogant that they could not believe they were truly threatened by a species they considered extinct. Jin So-min established communication with Earth Defense Force headquarters and received authorization for unlimited operations against criminal targets. The message from command was simple and direct. Use any means necessary to free human prisoners and eliminate threats to human colonies. The Navy SEAL had been given permission to start a war. The final part of Hyun-woo's message was broadcast on all frequencies throughout the galaxy, so that every species could hear it. Humans are returning to galactic civilization. We do not seek conquest or domination. We want only to protect our people and live in peace with those who respect our rights. But anyone who... The captured bridge of the Crimson Fang had become a war room, where former prisoners worked alongside Jin So-min to understand the full scope of criminal operations throughout the galaxy. The ship computer files revealed a network of slavery and piracy that stretched across hundreds of star systems, with human prisoners scattered like lost treasures throughout the darkness. Hyun-woo stood before the main communication array, preparing to send a message that would change everything. He had spent 3 days studying the intelligence gathered from the ship database. The information was both better and worse than he had hoped. Better because Earth had indeed survived and spread across the galaxy in secret colonies that the aliens knew. Nothing about worse because thousands of humans were being held by criminal organizations who treated them as exotic animals or disposable workers. Jin So-min had managed to establish contact with several human colonies that were hidden in the Outer Rim territories. The conversations confirmed what Hyun-woo had suspected. Earth had been deliberately maintaining a low profile to avoid attracting attention from hostile alien powers. The strategy had worked too well because even friendly species had forgotten humans existed, but now the time for hiding was over. The criminal organizations had made the mistake of capturing and enslaving humans in large numbers. Their own greed had created the conditions for their destruction. Hyun-woo activated the communication system that could reach every corner of criminal space and began to speak in a calm, clear voice that carried the authority of 20 years military service. This is Lieutenant Commander Park Hyun-woo of the Earth Defense Force speaking from the bridge of what used to be the Crimson Fang. Your warlord Thorak made the mistake of capturing humans. He is dead. His crew is dead. His ship is now under human control, and we have access to all his files, including detailed information about your operations. The response was immediate as communication channels throughout criminal space exploded with chatter. Some organizations tried to trace the signal, others demanded proof that the message was real. A few of the smarter crime bosses immediately began checking their own prisoner records to see if they were holding any humans. The paranoia spread faster than the actual message. Behind Hyun-woo, the freed prisoners worked with military efficiency to upload tactical data that showed exactly how a small group of humans had defeated a crew of 300 alien warriors. The files included detailed breakdowns of human fighting techniques, zero-gravity, combat methods, and organizational systems that had turned desperate prisoners into an effective army. Master Quinn had been monitoring alien news networks and reported that the message was causing panic in criminal organizations throughout the galaxy. Stock prices for slavery operations were crashing as investors realized they might have accidentally captured members of a species that could fight back. The psychological impact was exactly what Hyun-woo had hoped for. The second part of the message was directed specifically at any humans who might be listening. We know you are out there and we are coming to find you. Earth has not forgotten you, and neither has the Defense Force. Every human prisoner will be freed. Every human colony will be protected, and every organization that is harmed, our people will answer for their crimes. Jin So-min had been working to decode the ship computer files, and her discoveries were both encouraging and terrifying. The criminal organizations had been systematically attacking human settlements for decades, believing they were mopping up the remnants of an extinct civilization. Instead, they had been provoking a sleeping giant that was about to wake up very angry. The most important discovery was that Earth had not been passive during the years of isolation. The planet had been building a fleet and training soldiers and developing weapons that were generations ahead of anything the criminal organizations possessed. The Outer Rim colonies were not refugees, they were advanced bases for a military expansion that had been planned for centuries. Warlord Thorak had regained consciousness in the medical bay where he was being treated under guard. His interrogation revealed the locations of 17 major slave markets and the identities of crime bosses who specialized in human trafficking. The information was immediately uploaded to Earth Defense Force databases that Jin So-min had managed to contact. But Hyun-woo was not content to simply send information back to Earth and wait for official response. The humans held by criminal organizations needed immediate help, and he had captured the perfect tool for providing it. The Crimson Fang was one of the most feared warships in criminal space, and now it belonged to the good guys. The third part of his message was directed at the criminal organizations themselves. You have exactly 72 hours to release all human prisoners and surrender yourselves to the nearest legitimate government authority. After that time, we will begin hunting you down using your own ship and your own intelligence files. We know where you are. We know how you operate, and we know how to defeat you. The reaction to this ultimatum was predictable. Some crime bosses tried to rally their fleets for a coordinated response. Others began negotiating with human colonies to arrange prisoner releases. A few of the smartest criminals simply disappeared, hoping to avoid the coming storm. But most made the mistake of thinking they could intimidate humans into backing. Down Hyun-woo had expected this response, and he was ready for it. The Crimson Fang was more than just a captured ship. It was a symbol of what humans could accomplish when they were properly motivated. The former prisoners had become a crew that combined alien knowledge with human military discipline. They were eager to prove that their victory had not been a fluke. Over the next 3 days, reports came in from across the galaxy. Some criminal organizations had indeed released their human prisoners, but many others had decided to fight. The response confirmed what Hyun-woo had suspected. The criminal underworld had grown so arrogant that they could not believe they were truly threatened by a species they considered extinct. Jin So-min established communication with Earth Defense Force headquarters and received authorization for unlimited operations against criminal targets. The message from command was simple and direct. Use any means necessary to free human prisoners and eliminate threats to human colonies. The Navy SEAL had been given permission to start a war. The final part of Hyun-woo message was broadcast on all frequencies throughout the galaxy so that every species could hear it. Humans are returning to galactic civilization. We do not seek conquest or domination. We want only to protect our people and live in peace with those who respect our rights. But anyone who enslaves or harms humans will discover what it means to face Earth military might. The broadcast ended, but its effects continued to ripple through galactic civilization. Legitimate governments that had forgotten humans existed suddenly began reviewing old treaties and diplomatic records. The Galactic Council received thousands of inquiries about human legal status, and territorial rights. Species that had dismissed humans as extinct mythology began preparing formal contact protocols. More importantly, the criminal organizations began to understand that they had made a catastrophic mistake. The humans they had captured were not helpless refugees. They were citizens of a civilization that had spent decades preparing for exactly this kind of conflict. The Navy SEAL standing on the bridge of their captured flagship was not just a lucky survivor. He was the tip of a spear that could reach anywhere in the galaxy. Intelligence reports started coming in from across criminal space, confirming that the message had achieved its psychological objectives. Several minor crime syndicates had immediately released all human prisoners and disbanded their operations. Major organizations were pulling back from human territories and reconsidering their expansion plans. The smart criminals were already running, but the truly arrogant ones were doubling down on their mistake. They began gathering their fleets and preparing for what they thought would be an easy war against a species that had barely learned to travel between stars. Their scouts reported that human colonies were small and lightly defended. Their spies confirmed that Earth itself had no massive battle fleets visible in orbit. What they did not understand was that humans had learned the art of strategic deception from centuries of warfare among themselves. The visible defenses were deliberately minimal to encourage exactly this kind of overconfident response. The real military assets were hidden in ways that alien intelligence services had never encountered before. Yun Wu received regular updates from Jin So-min about the criminal response to his message. The intercepts showed that at least 30 major organizations were planning a coordinated strike against known human positions. They intended to crush this new threat quickly before it could spread. The timing was perfect for what Hyunwoo had in mind. The former prisoners aboard the Crimson Fang had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. A multi-species crew, united under human military leadership and dedicated to eliminating the criminal organizations that had enslaved them. Master Quinn had become the intelligence officer, Zek served as chief engineer, and fighters from a dozen different worlds provided expertise in their species' unique capabilities. But the most important transformation was in how they saw themselves. They were no longer victims waiting for rescue. They were warriors on a mission to free their people and protect their homes. The Psychologue. 6 months after the capture of the Crimson Fang, the name Park Hyunwoo had become something that criminal organizations throughout the galaxy whispered in fear. The human who had walked into Warlord Thorak's stronghold as a prisoner and walked out as its master had become the symbol of something that crime bosses thought was impossible. An extinct species returning with a vengeance that would reshape the balance of power across the stars. The campaign that followed the 72-hour ultimatum had been unlike anything in galactic military history. 17 slave markets had been liberated in coordinated strikes that left no survivors among the slavers. 4 major pirate fleets had been destroyed so completely that debris fields still glowed in space where their ships had been. The most feared criminals in the galaxy had become refugees fleeing toward the edge of known space. But the real victory was not measured in destroyed ships or freed prisoners. It was in the psychological transformation that had swept through galactic civilization. Species that had dismissed humans as ancient mythology were now sending diplomatic missions to Earth. The Galactic Council that had ignored human territorial claims for centuries was suddenly very interested in establishing formal relations. Hyunwoo stood on the observation deck of Earth Defense Force headquarters, watching supply ships arrive from colonies throughout human space. The network of bases and settlements that had been hidden for decades was now revealed as the foundation of a civilization that spanned hundreds of star systems. The isolation had been strategic patience, not weakness. Jin So-min had become his second in command, and together they had coordinated military operations that freed over 3,000 human prisoners from criminal organizations. The intelligence gathered from captured alien ships had revealed the full scope of the slavery networks and provided targeting information that made each strike devastatingly effective. The most important discovery had been that humans were not the only species being systematically enslaved. Criminal organizations had been capturing and trafficking beings from dozens of civilizations, but their victims had never been able to organize effective resistance. The human military approach of turning prisoners into soldiers had inspired similar rebellions throughout the Galaxy Master. Quinn had returned to his homeworld as a hero and was now serving as ambassador between the Aryan government and Earth. His philosophical writings about human military ethics had become required reading in several alien military academies. The elderly scholar had become an unexpected expert on human warfare and its psychological effects on both enemies and allies. Zek had been promoted to chief engineer of the Earth Defense Force Technical Division, where his alien perspective on human technology was providing breakthrough innovations. The combination of human military thinking with alien engineering knowledge was creating weapons and defensive systems that neither species could have developed alone. But the most profound change was in how humans saw themselves. The decades of hiding and strategic deception were over. Earth was no longer a secret backwater trying to avoid attention from hostile aliens. It was the center of an expanding civilization that had proven it could defend itself against any threat. The confidence was visible in everything, from diplomatic negotiations to military planning. The criminal organizations that had survived the initial campaign had retreated to the furthest edges of the galaxy, where they now existed as shadows of their former power. Some had tried to rebuild by avoiding human territories entirely. Others had attempted to negotiate safe passage agreements that were consistently rejected. The message was clear. There would be no sanctuary for slavers anywhere humans could reach them. The Galactic Council had finally extended formal recognition to Earth and invited human representatives to join the governing body. The invitation came with territorial guarantees that recognized human claims to over 200 star systems. The same council members, who had ignored human diplomatic requests for decades, were now competing to offer the most favorable trade agreements. But Hyunwoo was not content to simply accept diplomatic recognition and return to peaceful expansion. The criminal networks had been damaged but not eliminated, and thousands of non-human prisoners were still being held by organizations that had learned to hide more effectively. The war against slavery would continue until every prison ship was captured and every slaver was eliminated. The transformation in human military doctrine was equally dramatic. The Earth Defense Force had evolved from a defensive organization focused on protecting hidden colonies into an expeditionary force capable of projecting power anywhere in the galaxy. The lessons learned from the prisoner rebellions had been incorporated into training programs that taught soldiers how to turn any situation into a tactical advantage. New ships were being built that incorporated the best alien technology captured during the campaign. Human engineers working with former prisoners like Zek had developed propulsion systems that could outrun any criminal vessel and weapons that could penetrate any armor used by slavers. The technological advantage was growing with each captured enemy ship. The psychological warfare aspect had proven even more effective than the military campaigns. Criminal organizations were now afraid to capture anyone who might be human because the retaliation was swift and absolute. The mere rumor that humans were operating in a sector was enough to cause mass evacuations by criminal fleets. Intelligence reports indicated that several major crime syndicates had disbanded completely rather than risk attracting human attention. The economic impact was cascading through illegal markets as the cost of security against human retaliation made slavery operations unprofitable. Criminal organizations were discovering that humans made very expensive enemies. When Hyunwoo finally returned to Earth for the formal diplomatic ceremonies marking human entry into the Galactic Council, he was greeted not as a conquering hero, but as the advanced scout who had announced humanity readiness to take its place among the stars. The real victory was not his personal success, but the revelation that humans had been preparing for this moment for generations. The ceremony itself was broadcast throughout the galaxy as representatives from hundreds of species watched. Earth formally joined galactic civilization. The human delegation was led by diplomats who had been training for decades, but the real attention was focused on the Navy SEAL, whose capture and escape had triggered everything that followed. Standing before the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds, Hyunwoo delivered the message that would define human relations with alien civilizations for centuries to come. Earth seeks partnership with all peaceful species and will defend the rights of all free beings. We have proven that we can eliminate those who profit from slavery and oppression, but we prefer to build rather than destroy. The response was immediate and unanimous. Every legitimate government in the galaxy voted to support human anti-slavery operations. The criminal organizations that had seemed so powerful and untouchable were now facing coordinated opposition from every civilized species. The age of galactic slavery was ending, and everyone knew who had started its destruction. As the ceremonies concluded and diplomatic negotiations began for formal alliance agreements, Hyunwoo reflected on the journey from captured prisoner to galactic game-changer. The aliens had been right to fear humans, but they had completely misunderstood why human strength was not in individual violence or technological superiority. It was in the ability to turn any disadvantage into an opportunity, and any enemy into a teacher. The criminal organizations that had captured him, thinking they were acquiring a helpless slave, had actually given Earth the intelligence and motivation it needed to emerge from strategic isolation. The networks they had built to traffic in suffering had become the roadmap for their own destruction. The ships they had used to transport prisoners had become the fleet that hunted them down. The legend of Park Hyun-woo would be told throughout the galaxy for generations as the human who walked into a warlord stronghold alone and walked out leading an army. But the real story was about a species that had spent centuries preparing for exactly this moment and had seized the opportunity when it came. The age of underestimating humanity was over, and the age of fearing them had just begun.